Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and of course a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Townsend Guard, I'm a law professor, and I just wanna quilt. So today we talked to Michael Madison. Now, Michael is a law professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and he's very smart. So he's done a ton of work on what he calls the knowledge commons, and I asked him to come talk with us because I think we have a knowledge commons here in quilting. So we're going to talk to him about like how to think through this project and just where we are in the project, and we hope to have him back. But Michael Madison, he's awesome. So yeah, okay, so wow, so I've been immersed. I have a lot of questions. So I've read the article that you suggested, which is super great, and it's called, do you mind if I record this? Are you cool with recording?
Oh yes, go right ahead.
Okay, cool. The article, for those that may want to read it, is called Constructing Commons in the Cultural Environment. And it's you and Brett and Catherine Strandberg. Sorry, it's been a long day already. And it's your article that you wrote. You guys wrote this when did you guys write this article? 2000.
This was published in 2010.
2010. And the article is really important for our project, and we're trying to think through sort of how we study these things. And you and I, at the very end of another conversation, I started to tell you about the quilting project. And you're like, oh, well, you should be reading this article and strategizing about it in this way. So I'm super psyched, and I did a careful reading of it, and I have a lot of questions. And what I'd like to do is sort of pull back a little bit and explain. So you're a law professor, and what is this? What it was? So in case someone's listening to this and they have no idea what we're talking about, sort of, can we do sort of the big view of sort of what are we talking about today, and then we'll get into sort of some of the questions I have. Does that sound like a good plan?
Okay, so let me do a very quick overview of the landscape as it led to that article and why it might be helpful.
Cool.
So, like you...
That's good. That's just me. I just beep sometimes.
Okay. So like you, I'm an intellectual property law specialist. Mm-hmm. And the basic intuition underlying systems of intellectual property rights is that creating forms of exclusive rights and ownership in things that we create is a way to motivate and incentivize people to create more of them.
Right. That's like the standard story. Oops, sorry. That's the standard story, right? So
right, exactly. So that's the basic intuition.
Right. So give me an example of that in case people don't understand what you're saying. So
okay. So that basic story translates into typical patent law, mm-hmm. so that people who invent new devices or technologies get exclusive property rights, which we call patents, that allow them to maintain control over their inventions for a period of time, and therefore make money out of them by building companies and selling them or licensing them into the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And on the copyright side, it's the same story, except with copyright, the idea is that people who create things like novels or films or songs or other creative arts get exclusive property rights in their creations, which we call copyrights. And again, those exclusive rights give the creators the ability to sell their works or license their work into the marketplace and make money, which encourages them to continue to do more of that.
Right.
So that basic story of exclusive legal rights and copyrights and patents is very common. It's very long-standing historically.
And it's what we teach in school. So we spend semesters and a ton of time getting our students sort of immersed in the doctrine of that, what you just said. Hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of working through the law of what you just talked about.
Right. So lawyers learn this story and people in the business world experience this story, and people who are creating things or inventing things come across this story, and it's a very powerful and important story to a lot of people over a long period of time.
Right.
And the intuition that led to this article that you kicked off with was that story of exclusive legal rights in copyrights or in patents only tells part of the story.
Right.
That the world that we actually experience, both today and also historically, is filled with lots of illustrations and examples of situations where the motivation to produce creative things or inventive things is not based on exclusivity that leads to individual property rights like copyrights or patents, but instead, the world can be a very productive place when people share. So people collaborate, people partner, people are willing to share aspects of their work or sometimes share all of their work with colleagues, partners, peers, friends, in the business world, in the amateur world, in the volunteer world. So the idea is that once you look around the creative universe or the inventive universe, there are lots of instances of collaboration that is producing new stuff, in addition to the fact that we see lots of instances of individuals by themselves producing new stuff by relying on traditional copyrights or patents.
So like these systems then, so some of them, they work together in some way, right? I mean, or
right.
So it isn't like you're choosing one over the other. It's that the world is
right.
just more complicated than just those who are enforcing their copyrights. That there are other people that are collaborating and working together, and copyright isn't necessarily the focus of what they're doing. Is that
right?
Is that
right? For copyright might be a part of it, but might not be the dominant part of it.
Right.
So there's a lot. So an easy way to capture this idea as an example that pretty much everyone can relate to one right now is Wikipedia.
Right.
Right. So Wikipedia is a massive, impressive, powerful tool and resource that was built over a period of time by people collaborating with each other. And Wikipedia there's rules for how to participate and what content goes up, and sometimes content comes down. So Wikipedia is a very complicated place, but the basic insight is that Wikipedia is the product of collaboration that produced something amazing. Wikipedia was not a single author relying on exclusive rights like copyrights to motivate them to produce a single work.
Yeah, it is remarkable.
Right. So the article that we wrote, the Constructing Commons article, was our effort to say that these collaboration examples, or we sometimes call them collaboration institutions, we call them commons. And the reason we call them commons has to do with other aspects of research. So the label isn't quite as important, except we wanted to have one word to kind of capture what we're talking about. The idea of commons captures the idea of sharing. And the point of the article was to say that these collaboration examples or these sharing examples are important, that they should be studied, just like we study copyright systems and study patent systems as lawyers. We should be studying these collaboration systems, and that for any researcher, any professor who's going to do research on one of these collaboration systems, you should study it in a systematic way.
Right.
There should be a standard set of questions that are open-ended and flexible, but the same set of questions should get asked over and over again. That way, over time, it's possible to build up an inventory of examples that have been examined and analyzed, and different researchers can then say, well, this is how some of these examples work well.
Right.
This is how some of these examples work badly. These are ideas for improving the ones that are working poorly, or these are guidelines for building something new, if that's something that we're interested in building.
It's really interesting.
Yeah,
well, I'm really interested in sort of thinking through so I have a bunch of questions. First, in terms of the quilting world, it's really cool because we actually have a pool of material that we all know. There's like books on it of blocks. So the log, and we've named them. So like the log cabin block or the double wedding ring or whatever it is. Like we have names for it, and we all use these blocks in different ways. So that's kind of interesting to me, that we actually literally have a pool of resources that we can identify and get used constantly. At the same time, we have people that are taking those blocks and creating copyrighted works. Sometimes they're eligible for copyright. Sometimes they're too simple and wouldn't be eligible. But then they're also being paid for them. And then there's also this huge industry. It's a $5 billion industry surrounding quilting and all the things you can imagine that quilting is and needs. So I think one of the questions I have is, where does the concept of studying the commons fit within a larger framework of a full industry? Because you've done some of that in other projects. So I'm really curious how you approach that.
So some of the words that you just used to describe the quilting world are really important words, and it's interesting that you led off with those words, because that's how I would describe the relationship of quilting starting points and the sort of somewhat open character to one aspect of the world, and then how that relates to the business aspect of it, right? So you use the words pool, mm-hmm. and you use the word resources. Mm-hmm. And that is usually where we start when we're looking at one of these collaborative environments. So we would say, what is the set of resources, or what is the resource that is somehow having to be shared or managed in some respects, so that, number one, the resource continues to be available and useful to additional participants in the community. So there's a kind of sustainability aspect to the resource pool. And then second, what are the relevant rules and guidelines for how people can dip into the pool and use or borrow those resources? Under what circumstances do people have some obligation to give back and make sure that what they're producing gets contributed to the pool? Under some circumstances, those rules mean that you have free access, but also an obligation to give back freely. So it's essentially a volunteer or amateur style approach. And sometimes the rules include, there are aspects of the resource pool where people can extract content or borrow content and build it into for-profit businesses. So
we've got all of that with quilting. It's really remarkable.
Right.
The one
right.
thing,
So I just want to be clear that a for-profit business dimension to the resource management or to the design of the collaboration system, those things, the commons style is not inconsistent with selling things for money.
And tell me why.
Because the challenge that we're trying to what we're trying to understand in any particular setting is, how does content, meaning creative content in this case, how does creative content get produced, and how does that domain of creative content get perpetuated? Right. So you're studying the quilting community in 2017, 2018. Mm-hmm. There is a meaningful sense in which the quilting community of today is related to the quilting community of 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and before, right?
Right.
So tradition